I think this is true for any area of vocation, but it's especially true for the work that we do, because when we dishonor these ethics, we don't only dishonor ourselves, we dishonor the Lord and his cause. And I think that's something that none of us really want to be in a position of. I don't know where you are from an ethical standpoint, but I'm guessing that you were taught ethics by your parents. So there is a set of ethics for the profession, and we're going to take a look at those. Some of them are quite interesting. Some of them they're all significant, but some of them I think bear us taking a closer look at and talking about a little bit. There are also different elements of the profession of fundraising development. I call it gift development. That's my terminology. I like that terminology because when we help people develop their financial gifts, we are helping them develop the giftedness that they have been given by the Lord, and the linkage that might evoke with the mission of the organizations they support. Gift planning is the word we use in the foundation to talk about how people actually do some intentional gifting, and in the broader culture, the term fundraising is used for that, or philanthropic planning. So whatever terminology you end up using, I think it's important that we try to signal to the people we work with that we are doing this with integrity and in an ethical way. When God in his word picks up with the call to Abraham, you can see that he's setting apart for himself a nation. And he's not doing that just for a geographical people. He's doing that for a spiritual people. And so then the record starts. And this teaching of justice and mercy is very, very significant in terms of the integrity and the ethics that God had in mind for all of us in the world. Now, the world by this time had become so rampant with evil that I don't think even in today's world, even though there's nothing new under the sun, some of the stuff we're seeing today that bothers Christians, I think we had all that. We've always had all that. And I think God got so angry at it that he decided to destroy the world except for Noah and his seed. And then it picks up again. But so God talks to us about being just and being merciful. So what does that have to do with our work as developers of funding? And God had a plan for his people that they would be the ones who would be the ones to help others, not the one who was dependent on others. And in order to do that, you have to be resourced. And I think that that's God's desire for his people today. But you don't get there, in my view, by pretending that, woe is me. I think we get there by recognizing that we have a calling to be just people. Now, in our world today, there's all kinds of stuff going on in the history of the modern era. You do see a lot of atrocities that have been promulgated by people of faith. So I don't know where you sit on all that, and we're not here to discuss world events necessarily, but when our ministries do that which is just and merciful, God will always bless it. He will always see to it that it is blessed. All of our ministries can easily say, well, yeah, we're about this justice and we're about mercy, but we also have to make it personal to us that when we go to visit donors, when we talk and interact, that we aren't trying to always provide another scheme, that we aren't always trying to help people do something that maybe their heart isn't ready to do. And yet, I think because the Lord has created this fence for us, that we can be bold at the same time. We can ask people to tell us what their wildest imaginations might be with regard to generosity. And you can be just and you can be merciful in doing that as long as you love them in the way Christ loves us. And I think that's the key there. But when you're dealing with donors, we have a real opportunity to encourage them that I can see that you love the Lord. I can see that this ministry means something to you. I can see that there is something that has been put into your heart that speaks of trying to be just and merciful and trying to honor God with your life. And I think regardless of what kind of gift, what kind of donor, I think we can always encourage people in that way. And my experience is that people that we serve don't always hear that personally, but we get the opportunity to say that to them. And I think it's important for us to say that to them, regardless of the size of the gift, regardless of the nature of the gift. Let them know that God is working in them, and it will be to them something that will be very, very significant, and connect them back to the first commandment, that God is first in their life. I think there's a lot of fundraisers who are very, very successful at encouraging people to give because people want to give. But I don't think it ever wants to be said of any of us that we twisted people's arms or that we motivated them against what God had put in their hearts. It's, to me, the encouragement aspect of it is, Paul talks about that. And we want to, our gift, our spiritual gift is that to encourage, and always grounded in these ethics. We have to thank a donor, to encourage a donor, to ask a donor, is really it's as missionary as helping a child learn about Jesus. It's just a very different kind of work, though. And that is that we're encouraging people to do what Jesus asked us to do without neglecting the other things that they have to do in their life, without neglecting. And that's where the first commandment comes into view. All Jesus's parables, every single one of them on monetary, are all treatises on the first commandment. They're less to do with the financial issues than they are about the relationship that we have to God. And so we're asking people to give to Christian ministry, and instead of saying, well, you should, or you would really be better if you did, we want to stay away from those kind of phrases because that's not merciful or being just in the ethics of the Lord. But we can encourage people to think about their relationship to God and act upon that, and then encourage them to tithe. In my view, the thing that separates the kind of work we do within the confines of the Christian faith, and I won't limit it to Lutheran, but we are all part of the Lutheran system. The agape love brings in a new dimension. And that's the prayer in the Lord's Prayer, thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. So we find ourselves in the cross, at the anchor of the cross, at the foot of the cross, looking at Jesus, our Lord and Savior, and trying to follow his ways. Not self-serving, but serving the needs of others, not for our sake, but for the sake of others, for their sake. And I think that for me, from a Christian standpoint, is where ethics begins and ends. I think we all understand this by faith, but I wanted to make it a point. I've toyed with this, the word philanthropy and agapathy. I don't think agapathy is going to take root, but I have a lot of fun with it. It's kind of my way of thinking whenever I hear the word philanthropy, which is the new buzzword out there. I think agapathy. And I think that's what we're involved with here in the work that we do. I think it's fine for us to say, philanthropy and use that, but it's more than just a horizontal dimension for us, isn't it? And that's what you were saying, Phil, earlier too. Philagopathy. Yeah. Well, Filio, love is in friends. I mean, that's all part of the etymology of my own name, but
it's true though. I mean, that you think of the cross shape.
Right.
I mean, you normally think of philanthropy just this.
Right.
This brings the whole.
It brings the whole, and there isn't really a good word to describe that in our current vernacular that comes out of the culture. But that's not what's important. What's important is how we do what we do, I think. Part of the ethic that we need to work at is to recognize that, like Jesus did, we are there to serve others, not for what we're trying to find them to do. And that's really a hard thing because, our goals are to raise $100,000 this year, whatever the number is. That really doesn't have much to do with the service we bring to each donor as we interact with them. I mean, it guides us, yeah, it certainly does, and it helps us to think about terms about now. I've got to ask 100 people for $1,000, or 1,000 people for $100, or one person for 100,000. Which way do I want to work? I mean, maybe it guides us in that, but as we're working with the individuals, it's not that kind of stuff that drives, at least it shouldn't be, that drives our relationships. It's serving them to be a part of this larger effort. And that agapathy, that vertical dimension, I think becomes very significant in our ethics. So Paul here talks about a public witness of discipleship. In his patience, God waited to deal with sin committed in the past. He waited so that he could display his approval at the present time. This shows that he is a God of justice, a God who approves the people who believe in Jesus. So do we have anything to brag about? Bragging has been eliminated. On what basis was it eliminated? On the basis of our own efforts? No, indeed. Rather, it's eliminated on the basis of faith. We conclude that a person has God's approval by faith, not by its own efforts. And Luther's discovery of this was reformational to the world and to him, right? So we work in the realm of faith, and faith is a mysterious thing. It is not a gift that I have the ability or you have the ability to promulgate, but we do have the ability to encourage, and I think that's our rightful role. And the way we encourage faith in this way, in the way we work, is to encourage people to find the seat of their generosity and to then massage that, so to speak, with them, to encourage them to act on that, to invite them to be a part of that. And if we can see that ethic as a part of our calling, we'll do it with the personality that God has given us. We'll do it with the best outcome that can possibly be there, because it'll be a positive. It won't be a negative. I think that asking people to act upon their faith with generosity is some of the best stuff that you can ever do for people's walk with the Lord. Confidentiality is going to come up and bite a lot of our ministries because it's not tended correctly. And I'd rather be err to the side of what our LCMS Foundation does than err to the side of loosey-goosey on this, because especially, and you got to be careful about that, because we got to maintain confidentiality. A gift that is given publicly, a direct gift that's given, is a matter of public record theoretically, but don't assume it. Make sure that you're asking your donors what they think about that before. If you're going to publish names, make sure that you get their permission. ALDI is the Lutheran group. AFP is the cultural group. It's the big group. They have a code of ethics that I've printed on the pages that are in the book. And I'm not going to go into these in any detail today, but I would ask you to be familiar with these, at least read it. And there's more on compensation and contracts down here at the bottom that are there. The thing that I want to end with here before we break is the model standards for charitable planning that were promulgated by the NCPG. Used to stand for the National Committee on Planned Giving. That organization has changed its name to the PPP, or the Partnership for Philanthropic Planning. And so now they own the model standards for charitable planning, and those model standards, I think, begin on page 11. And so if you just look at these, it begins with the primacy of philanthropic motivation. That if a person doesn't have an intent to give charitably, be careful. That there's another intent out there, just be real careful about that. I think, going back to our treatment of the biblical ethics, is that I think that most people who want to do some charitable work have within them an intent to do good, even though they may not recognize it. And so one of our opportunities is to help connect that in their heart. I'll tell you what, the financial planners out there who are competing with us for a gift and a gift plan will eat us to shreds if we're not accurate. And I've seen it time and time again, because they have relationships with good donors, and if they have competency, and this is one of the problems of our industry. Right now, plan giving, gift planning, and gift development is an unregulated, better yet, a self-regulated industry. We are self-regulated. There's not a regulation outfit out there other than these ethics principles that regulates us. Because of that, the financial professionals don't know how to value the competency that we possess. And because of that, we have to make sure that we project our competency in the way we do our work. It's just and I'll leave it at that.